Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
John, I have a singular goal this week. You know what my singular goal this week is?
I have no idea. Thrill me.
To make it through 5 shows and not miss a one. How's that?
Yeah, that's a Willie Nelson song, isn't it? Lord, help me make it through the week.
I think it's Make It Through 5 Shows. Wasn't that the name of that song?
I think that's what it is.
Help me make it through 5 shows. That's
you
John.
can do it, Brad. I believe in you.
John, I appreciate that. That's John Combest, Combest. He has his website called johncombest.com. Every single day of his life for the past 22 years and soon to be 23 years, he puts together a list of all the important topics in the state of Missouri, which is on his website, which are essentially, back in the day, you don't hear this term too much anymore, hyperlinks, where you just click on the link and it takes you to the story, be it a newspaper, TV station, official press release, video, social media post, anything like that. It's all there. And we start to show off every morning by giving John a chance to use his wisdom of all the different policies and things that go in behind the John Combest show. He has an algorithm that he does, and he hits a computer, and it spends like 3 or 4 hours of supercomputer time and comes up with what we call the top 3. And we started off with...
Now on with the countdown.
Casey counting it down, and he starts off with...
In third place...
In the spirit of Juneteenth, Brad. Go down, Beavis, tell old Pharaoh, let my earning tax go. Some news from the weekend. You go to johncombest.com on Saturday, you will see the story about St. Louis City settling on earnings tax. Did you happen to see this, Brad?
They essentially threw in the towel. Yes, I did.
Yeah, and it was, I'm not sure if it's surprising or not. You and I have talked about this at length. For folks who don't know, Brad does a really good job describing this, but I'll try to summarize it. In general, folks who during the pandemic might be working for a company that's based in St. Louis City, had to pay an earnings tax, even though they physically never went into the city, even though they worked remotely. The city said, oh, heck no, we still want that revenue. And those citizens, which were, by the way, led by I guess you could call him at one point a legal gadfly, maybe, Beavis Shock. Would that be a way to describe him, Brad?
No, just a guy with a cool name. That's how I describe him.
Yeah, just a guy with a cool name. By the way, he's featured in this Austin Hughley story. The lead picture with the Post-Dispatch, Beavis is sitting there. He appears to be below camera shot getting perhaps a prostate exam. He has a very surprised and semi-delighted look on his face. And he has been leading the legal effort on this. So in short, the city of St. Louis has agreed to the refunds for folks who were, quite frankly, never stepping foot inside the city and working inside the city, yet still paying that earnings tax. So the attorneys appear to be quite pleased here, Brad. And remember, too, that AT&T still has a lawsuit going on over this exact same issue. Austin Hughley talked to a representative from AT&T on Friday, and the representative said they're reviewing the settlement. I'm guessing, Brad, I'm no attorney, but I'm guessing that AT&T will probably receive the same favorable treatment as these attorneys did. So a little bit of resolution here, Brandon. And we talked about in the past, Mayor Tashara Jones says she has been anticipating this result, and in fact, according to Tashara Jones, has built a relatively conservative budget that does not assume that the city will continue to take this money in.
Well, let me go back and give a little bit more context to it. It wasn't necessarily about the it was about the COVID thing, but this dates back to, I guess, the late 80s, early 90s, when the boys and girls out in Bridgeton were upset about their houses being taken away by the city of St. Louis, and they started a campaign against the city, and they found this arcane rule that nobody really knew existed, that if you work for, like, let's say you were an executive for Anheuser-Busch, and you spent one day a week at the headquarters on one Bush Place, whatever it was, and you spent the other 4 days on the road, you only had to pay the earnings tax on the amount of money you earned when you were physically in the city of St. Louis. So what the Bridgeton Air Defense did this big campaign. Hey, if you work for Anheuser-Busch, they went through all the Fortune. At the time we had, believe it or not, we had Fortune 500 companies actually headquartered in St. Louis, but that was a time long ago and far away. But they ran these ads on radio and TV, and all these people started applying for refunds. Well, this has been going on for years, but what happened was when the COVID thing happened, the city said, hey, we don't care. We don't care what the circumstances are. If your employer's in the city of St. Louis, and like for example, Odyssey in the radio business, almost all their personnel, all their talk show hosts, their DJs, and all the stations did their shows from home, and most of them were not in the city of St. Louis. So they applied for the refund, and they were rejected. Because I guess they were claiming, special circumstances or something like that at that point in time?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's important context, too. Thanks, Brad. Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, well, once again, it's this weird thing. If you ever sit down and you go through, you read, and I know to a certain extent you do this to somewhat extent, is you read the rules and regulations of things. Sometimes you come up with these golden nuggets that's like, hold on a minute. What does that say again? You come up.
Hey, that's like we've discussed on the show, the ability of the Rams to repurchase their old training facility in that hidden clause, maybe not so hidden clause. They can purchase it for $1 25 years after they move. And guess what? We're coming up on 25 years after they established that in 1999.
Where's that stand? Do you know what the latest on that update is?
I haven't seen anything since the St. Louis Business Journal had a piece. I believe it was in either April or May. For folks who didn't hear that episode, there was a provision in the Rams contract, I guess, with local governments that their training facility, which is located up on 141, like 141 and 70, I guess you would call it.
Well,
go ahead, Brad.
It used to be on the name of the street was Rams Way. And to give you an idea how ticked off the St. Louis people was, because I told you I do business with another company right down the street.
That's right.
They changed the name of the street. It used to be Rams Way. Now it's Athletic Way.
Yeah, and underneath it says Cronky suck.
Yes,
but they have the ability to a provision in the contract said that the Rams could purchase it back for $1 25 years after 1999. And that is coming up. I think maybe it's September that it's coming up. So something will happen. It's a beautiful Lou Fuse facility now. They have soccer fields, soccer teams, and lacrosse teams, and others play there now. So I don't know what's going to happen, Brad.
It's going to be interesting. And you may say, why in the world would they put a clause in the contract where they could buy it for $1? Because we were so hard up for a football team, we would have given them. God, we might have given them part of Ladue. Hey, you can have the eastern section of Ladue because those are the older houses that aren't worth as much as the western section of Ladue, right? They got
a couple kiosks at St. Louis Center, right, which have proven to be the most lucrative of anything.
Right,
in that
right.
contract.
That worked out real well for them. Okay, number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
The Springfield News Leader has a national story that has some Missouri tidbits to it. A pretty good piece. The reporter is the business reporter from the News Leader named Tony Madden. And the headline is, Electric Vehicle Hype Slows, but Missouri's EV infrastructure is growing. The main takeaway from this is that AAA does, annual surveys. Brad, you know way more about this stuff than I do. But in their annual consumer survey, the demand, I'll just read the factoid here. Only 18% of adults say they would be likely or very likely to buy a new or used electric vehicle, not a hybrid, but a straight-up electric vehicle, which is down 23% from last year. And meanwhile, 63% of adults say they were unlikely or very unlikely to buy an electric vehicle for their next purchase. Now, Brad, the interesting thing is Missouri has take a wild guess here. I don't know how you would even quantify this if you're guessing, but approximately how many electric vehicles are registered here in the state of Missouri, Brad?
100,000.
24,000 665. So Missouri is below the national average for electric vehicles, but uniquely, and here's what I think is the most interesting thing in this whole piece, is that Missouri has more charging stations per 10,000 residents than the national average. Even Kansas has more electric vehicle charging stations per 10,000 residents than the national average. And that's according to a University of Missouri Extension survey. So that kind of surprises me. Does that surprise you, Brad?
24,000? That's all the electric vehicles that are registered?
Yeah, 24,665. So fewer than 25,000 electric vehicles are registered in Missouri.
That shocks me. That's like a drop in the bucket. That's nothing.
Yeah, I was surprised that there were that few, too.
Wow. I almost can't believe that number. That's hard to believe because, quite honestly, I do see a lot of Teslas are... Let's go back to the old days of the BS show. Shelley, one day on the air, she's going like, what are these tornado cars? You know, she's...
Oh, she saw the T?
Well, and if you look at it, you know, it's quite honestly, in full support of her, if you look at the Tesla logo that's on the cars, it does sort of look like a tornado. You know, it's got like the T at the top, and looks like...
Yeah, I could see.
Right. But... And by the way, did you know this is Brad, the car nerd, talking. Do you know there's a new trend with cars in general? And for a long time, the trend, let's go back 20, 25 years ago, where it started mostly with the foreign car companies. Instead of putting their brand name on the car, they put their logo, like the Toyota logo and the Mazda logo.
Yeah, I get it. Sure.
I saw a couple of the newer Teslas the other day that actually have the word Tesla spelled out on the trunk lid.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Instead of just having a little logo on the back. Now, that might have been somebody that did themselves, but I've read some other things that talk about that this is going to be the growing trend where, and you know why the reason they just went to the logos?
Why?
That way, because the names of some of the cars vary with some of the different languages. And when you have, like, for example, if you have a car that's manufactured that ends up in China, essentially the logo is universal. In other words, the Toyota logo is universal around the world, where they don't have to change the language or everything like that. And by the way, to this day, can I, as long as I'm giving you card nerd stuff,
go ahead.
Do you know the most desirable car in China? If you were to go to China and walk along the streets of China and just talk to the normal citizens, and if you said to them, hey, if you had all the money you needed, or if you had a lot of money, what car would you buy? And you know what the universal answer is?
No idea.
Buick.
Wow, why is that?
The story dates back to some very influential leader of the Chinese government back, I believe, in the mid 1900s, or maybe might have been the early to mid 1900s. I believe before World War II, he had a custom-built Buick that was his limousine, and everybody, all the Chinese people, looked upon having a Buick as the most prestigious car, which is sort of similar to the United States, because a lot of people would opt for a Cadillac because that's what the president had. The Cadillac had a president. Well, quite honestly, the president had a Cadillac starting in the 60s, because up until that point, if you remember the whole situation with the John F. Kennedy thing, he was actually
JFK, yeah.
He was in a Lincoln. But the Buicks are still huge in China, and there's one difference between an American Buick and a Chinese Buick, and you'll never get this. If I gave you 100 guesses, you'd never guess this. You know what that one?
I do know the answer, because American Buicks are fueled by ethanol, which is corn, and Chinese ones are fueled by rice ethanol, Brad. You know, that's all they eat over there.
Could be close, but no cigar on that one, John. The Buick logo in the Chinese cars is typically twice the size of the American logo on an American car, because it's one of those things that they want everyone to know they're driving a Buick.
Oh, yeah.
So they make them.
They're paying to promote a company's. It's kind of like Brad Hildebrand talking about Major League Baseball. Now, the other thing that I think about Buicks, though, Brad, you know, the other reason why they're popular in China.
What is that?
They're very low maintenance.
I'm not going to touch that. Okay. And finally,
the number one.
Boy, speaking of China, you know who loves China? Candidates for Missouri governor. And they're fighting with each other, Brad. Top story from my website on Saturday. If you go to johncombest.com, here's the headline from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Rivals say Mike Kehoe dodging debates ahead of August 6th primary for Missouri governor. Now, there's some gems in here, Brad. Last week we talked about how Missouri statewide races are reaching that point where they're having the ethics nonsense. You know, everybody's just throwing ethics charges against each other.
Right.
And now we're reaching the debate about debates segment of the campaign. Some key quotes here, Brad. One, there's a quote from each of the governor's campaign. The gist of it is that Ashcroft and Eigel really want to be on the same stage as Kehoe because they want to force him to answer a bunch of questions. That's what they're saying. So, the spokeswoman for Bill Eigel, Sophie Shore, who, by the way, as we all know, is the daughter of 1990s comedy legend Pauly Shore, she says Bill Eigel will debate anytime, anywhere. And she says there are several debate plans if Kehoe doesn't chicken out per usual. Now, Jay Ashcroft, for his part, or let's go to Mike Kehoe. Mike Kehoe was talking a little bit about how hard it is to schedule debates. Mike Kehoe's campaign says that he's out and about all the time. Mike Kehoe's spokeswoman is Gabby Picard, who, by the way, is the son of United Federation of Planets leader Jean-Luc Picard. She says that that a July 11th debate had been declined because they had a previously scheduled event, so they're not going to be at a July 11th event. And as for a KSDK debate, which I'm guessing would be hosted by Mark Maxwell, she said, quote, "We are still working through that request, but hoping it works out." And she points out that Mike Kehoe already took part in a debate at Lincoln Days, which was back in February, in front of Missouri Republican activists. And then one more quote from Jay Ashcroft's campaign. It's Jason Cabell Rowe, who, by the way, is the son of former Astros third baseman Enos Cabell, is talking about Mike Kehoe and says he is going to try and buy the race, avoiding any cross-examination. Now, the last quote I'll read, Brad, is from Gabby Picard from the Kehoe campaign. She said, in response, Picard said, losing candidates focus all their time and energy on a debate schedule. So we're debating about debates, Brad. And again, in short, if you're Eigel or you're Ashcroft, you want to get Kehoe on stage. He's got so much money, and he's going to be flooding social media ads. He's all over the state. He's going to be on television. You want to get him to talk about the gas tax. You want to get him to talk about China. You want to get him to talk about spending money on roads and government stuff. So it's a winning strategy for Eigel and Ashcroft to try to get him on stage. If I'm Kehoe, I'm nowhere near a debate stage. I'm not answering any of those questions. I'm just doing events around the state and flooding the airwaves.
Okay, can I tell you something weird that happened to me just yesterday? And
yeah, please do.
And you may laugh at this, and I don't know if I took a screenshot of this, but I'm just going through X and doing a little scroll. I don't spend a tremendous amount of time scrolling on X, but I'm going through X and I see a tweet, or X, whatever they call it now, from Governor Kehoe. And it talks about he's proud to be a father, and it shows him with his wife and 4 kids. And I look, I sort of scan his kids, and then I see him, and I thought to myself, oh my God, he's a dead ringer for a particular ex-president. Take a guess which president I think he looks like, in this picture at least, he's a dead ringer for.
Ronald Reagan.
No, LBJ. He looks...
Oh, wow, okay.
He looks...
I think he has a little more hair than LBJ, but you mean just like the way he's built?
Well, yeah, in this picture, it's
in
like...
his face?
Well, yeah, I'm thinking to myself, that looks like... And we're talking about Lyndon B. Johnson, who was the president, who was vice president when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. He took over in, 1963, finished out that part of JFK's our tenure, was reelected in 64, served from 65, decided not to run for reelection in 68 because of all the controversy with the Vietnam War, which brought us Richard Nixon. But it just was sort of weird. I thought to myself, God, he looks just like LBJ. And
yeah, I mean, they're both tall men. They're sturdy men, I would say. I would put Claudia Kehoe leagues above Lady Bird, but that's just my straight heterosexual male bias there.
My my mom was obsessed. She did not like Lady Bird Johnson. If you know the
what irked her about about the second LBJ?
First off, that was the one thing we were sort of spared from with the first ladies, because the first ladies always have something, some iron to put into the fire or some axe to grind. And with Lady Bird, it was beautification. And she's the one that she would get on TV and she goes, "We're going to go plant a tree, a bush, and a shrub." She would always talk about that. And she was the one that spearheaded the campaign in a lot of cities, and specifically in Austin, where they got all the billboards taken down on the highways.
That's nice.
They said billboards were ugly, which I think billboards are beautiful, but that's a whole nother story.
I think, they generate revenue.
Well,
and also I heard that she was the inspiration between turning just a couple dirty stink holes in the Klondike Park.
I'm not going to touch that one either. Okay, we have to take a break.
I didn't mean it like that, Brad. That wasn't a Pride Month. By the way, happy Flag Day. We didn't celebrate Flag Day.
It's funny.
And during Pride Month, we have to be super careful to enunciate. There's an L in there. Happy Flag Day, Brad, and also belated Happy Father's Day to you.
It's funny you should mention that, because I thought about that. We didn't talk about that either. Okay, we have to take a break.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?